The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you all for taking the time out of, I'm sure, your busy days to join us here this afternoon. Depending on where you are in the world, good afternoon to you, good morning, and welcome to Technical Toolboxes webinar event that is going to be exploring energy trends in today's sector and the data-driven future. My name is Joseph Ladner. I'm Director of Engineering Performance Advisors here at Technical Toolboxes, and I'm going to be today's Master of Ceremonies. For today's topics, we're going to go through several areas, with the first being talking about global trends and pressures on the pipeline sector and the oil and gas industry, covering important changes faced by midstream oil and gas operations. We are joined today from Gary Hines, Vice President of Operations at PRCI, and we're going to be exploring with Gary and looking at the trends that matter to the industry. Further, we're going to dive into how Technical Toolboxes is responding to these challenges, and we're joined today to receive insight there from Technical Toolboxes CEO and President Drew Lafleur. Throughout this webinar today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to sprinkle in some poll questions here and there. We would love to have your interaction, hear what you have to say, and then following the webinar, we're actually going to have a Q&A round, and we invite you all to submit questions, not only at the end of the webinar today, ladies and gentlemen, but throughout, because what we're going to do is, as questions come in at the end of the webinar, we're going to have Gary and or Drew or myself answer those questions for everyone. So please don't feel the need to hold back. Ask those questions as they come, and we'll organize them at the end on as they're received and answering those. So please add those questions to the chat. All right. So before we go into global trends and pressures on the oil and gas industry, let's actually go ahead and start with our first poll question. All right, so give me a second, and I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. Poll is live. So the question is as such: what are your objectives for the near future? Again, what are your objectives for the near future? Please see the questions below. The poll is in progress, from optimizing resource portfolios, streamlining to reduce expenditures, attract and optimize employees, or something else. So I'm going to give everyone a little bit to answer these questions. Maybe another 20 seconds. Please take a look at the poll and answer these as they come in. I'll give you another about 17 seconds. Thank you. See a lot of good responses coming in. 10 seconds. 5 more seconds, and we're going to close the poll. We'll take a brief look at the results. 3, 2, 1. Close poll. Let's go ahead and share the results. Let's take a look at it. All right, so a pretty even distribution to, of course, always looking at ways to streamline or reduce capital expenditures and operating expenditures. And, you know, a lot of answers to aligning to new environmental, social, government requirements, and some breakout there and some of the other results. So we're going to go ahead and stop showing the poll results. Go back to our presentation today on global trends and pressures on the oil and gas industry. All right. So for today's webinar, we're going to focus on a few different areas. What does this mean? You know, how can we optimize? How are we looking at trends today where we can optimize resource portfolios to maximize our return on investment? Mr. Gary Hines and Drew Lafleur is going to be going into that in more detail. From there, we're going to be talking about, hey, in today's climate, how can we streamline to guard against future downturns, but also improve scalability when, of course, times are good? The business environment is more competitive than it's ever been. So it's vital that you keep your capital and operational expenditures down as much as possible. Taking advantage of the current high price environment without unnecessary exposure to downturns is key. Next, we're going to go into attracting and optimizing employees in a tight labor market. Attracting and holding on employees is a huge challenge today. We're all facing it. We're facing it here at Technical Toolboxes, right? So you want to attract and retain the most skilled and talented people. You also want to give them the right training that gives them to full productivity as soon as possible and provide development in their careers. Last but not least, aligning to additional environmental and social and government requirements. Pipeline operators and service providers alike need to keep up with the accelerating pace of changes. You all know this very well. What does this mean? It means aligning to additional environmental, social, and government requirements. The consequences of pipeline releases have never been higher, and we're going to be going into that in more detail here today. So with that being said, I'm going to introduce our first speaker here today, which is going to be insight from Pipeline Research Council International's Vice President of Operations, Mr. Gary Hines. Give a little introduction to Gary. Gary received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, where he graduated with honors and received his MBA from Colorado State University. Gary is a registered professional engineer in the state of Missouri, and also is a certified association executive. Gary currently serves as Vice President of Operations for PRCI, where he manages the day-to-day functions of the organization. Prior to PRCI, he was the Vice President of Learning and Professional Development at the Southern Gas Association, SGA, where he worked to strengthen their position in the education space and the natural gas industry. Gary has over 15 years of experience in our sector, working for pipeline operators alike, with over 10 being in corporate operation leadership and various management roles. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Mr. Gary Hines, where you can begin with a little bit of background and a little more information on PRCI. Gary?
Sounds great, Joseph. Just a microphone check. Make sure you can hear me okay.
Loud and clear, Gary, loud and clear.
All right, very good. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for sure for the invite today. I do want to cover, just as you mentioned, for those that may not be familiar with PRCI, a little bit of background on the organization, certainly our strategic plan, where we're heading, and then I want to move in swiftly from there to really what some of the poll was just about, and really what our focus is regarding the research that we are doing, and the real purpose of this webinar, from the data-driven decision making and digitization, if you will, of our research results. So first few items here again is some background on the organization. You can see here in how we break this down from the Pipeline Research Council International perspective. Certainly known for our research. We on an annual basis invest about $8 to $11 million annually in research efforts. Some of that is continuing work that has been ongoing for several years, and some of that is in some new areas as well. Depending on where the conversation goes later, we can certainly get into the, if you will, the new areas. But one area I want to point out that is relatively new for us, we launched the Emerging Fuels Institute last year, and specifically focused right now on hydrogen, renewable natural gas, et cetera. So more to come in that space, but we continue to look for ways to collaborate with our membership, and again, solve problems through the typically the technical research that is needed for those technical challenges for the industry. Next slide really is just a quick graphical, just to say happy birthday to the organization. We are 70 years old. We did start out of a working group with the American Gas Association back 70 years ago now, and such good results out of that effort that decided to establish a separate independent organization from AGA, and we have been since. So just a quick happy birthday to the organization. And for those of you that are out there that have been part of the PRCI in the past, just a word of thanks for getting us to where we are today, and we look forward to another 70+ years in the future. Next slide really is just a quick view of our mission. A few words that I want to point out on this mission that really, I think, gravitate towards this webinar and the purpose of this webinar, and that is the collaborative effort in which we work to deliver relevant and innovative, keyword here, applied research. And I think that's what we'll get to in our conversations as we work through this webinar. The next slide really is more of our mission. And what I would say here is that we're pleased with our historical results, but we're certainly not satisfied. And whenever I say not satisfied, that just means we've got more work to do. And that just comes true in the vision here for providing the safest, cleanest, and most efficient transportation and storage of energy. So we've got work to do there yet. And that's why we continue to work towards our vision for the future. So again, certainly pleased with the 70 years, but we've got more work to do. So we're up to the challenge for that. On the next slide is again, more of a perspective of who our members are, and showing the diversification of membership that we have between pipeline operators, between pipeline industry organizations, other trade associations that are members of PRCI, and also our associate members. So really from a membership perspective, we're made up of about half pipeline operators and half associate members. Again, provides good diversity of a relationship of solving the technical problems that face our industry. And that first bullet is more about the breakdown of us being international. Just over half are North American, but we do have good representation from non-North American countries as well within our portfolio. And that next slide, just as we were advancing there, if you will, the graphical representation of who those pipeline operators are. And really the key word that I would point out here is leveraging. And what I mean by leveraging is each one of these member organizations leverage dollars into the organization to do those research projects. So if a research project takes $1 million, each one of those organizations can take a piece of that, and again, collaborate and work with our peers to advance further than what they could have done by themselves. So very, very proud of the operating companies that we have within the organization, and the diversification that we've got between liquid operators, gas operators, and those that have a combination of both assets. Next slide is just a quick look at our 3-year strategic plan, and this really starts getting into the purpose of really why I agreed to be here today, and it's under that core research initiative where we are working to enhance the adoptability and usability of research. So what does that mean? We'll get into that a little bit today, but I'll also briefly mention some efforts we've got in our technology center, specifically in leveraging data. We've been doing environmental commitment for a while, but we certainly wanted to enhance that and apply focus certainly for the next 3 years, and I know for years to come. And that's really where our Emerging Fuels Institute comes from, underneath that environmental commitment. So 3 initiatives does not mean we're not working on other things, but for the purpose of today, we'll really focus on that adoptability and usability of research. And then also, again, spend a bit of time on the virtual technology development center that we continue to roll out. So that's background of PRCI. If you've got questions just about PRCI in general, certainly interested in taking those offline from this webinar following the session today. So certainly reach out and inquire, and make sure that either if I can answer your question, I certainly will. And then if I need to get somebody else to assist, I'll do that as well. So rolling to the next slide, it's really the core content of what I started thinking about regarding our topic today. And that is, whenever you start thinking about the data and digitizing things and software delivering and our effort to enhance the usability of research results, I started thinking about, well, what's some things that are causing challenges with that? And I believe we've all heard of the Great Resignation, and some of you may have more familiarity with this than others, but I just wanted to offer a few statistics to help understand why this is increased importance for us, And that first bullet point there, I think, really raises the good flag to understand that just within 1 month last year, 4.4 million people left their jobs. Now, that doesn't get into the reasons why they left their job, but certainly those that are, if you will, resigning from their current positions or previous positions, the number's on the increase. And for the energy industry specifically, the age range that's most impacted in this is 30 to 45. Now, 30 to 45, I'm a Generation X is kind of my, if you will, my group that I'm placed in. So this would be what I would call, you know, the millennials and the Gen X's that are most impacted here. And again, we don't know the full reasons in this presentation. We're not getting into that, but I do think it's significant that if you think about the fact that the age range most impacted is 30 to 45. If you have somebody that started, you know, let's say out of a university or a trade school in the early 20s, then you've got 10 to 15 years of experience that's leaving the organization. That's the real purpose I wanted to bring this statistic into this conversation. So it ends up being quite a bit of institutional knowledge that could be leaving not only your organization, but the industry as a whole. And you can see the results there as if you will, an outcome of that. Projects getting delayed because of loss of institutional knowledge, incomplete or incorrect design, ill-equipped and potentially frustrated staff. I think that does, if you will, find its way through an organization, even if it's not a root cause, it's maybe an onset effect. And certainly higher costs for projects, again, inefficiencies, duplication of effort. So these are more of the results that might be found as a result of the Great Resignation. So even though we might not be able to turn around the Great Resignation, when if you look at those results, I started thinking about, well, what does that mean again for our industry, for what we're doing as PRCI, and moving the research results that we have into something that's consumable. So hang on to that piece as we continue to move through this. So speaking of that from the generational perspective, I then wanted to highlight the Generation Z, the Gen Zs. And the biggest reason I wanted to bring this up is these are the individuals that are coming into our workplace that for myself as a Gen X, again, different needs, different wants. And so whenever you look at this list, a couple of things to point out is that Gen Z are, if you will, the largest population group according to the 2016 census by percent. Millennials are pretty close, baby boomers are pretty close, but they're the largest. And so we certainly cannot lose sight of them from the perspective that we have to pay attention to who they are, what formed them for what they are, and most importantly, how do we leverage who they are? And so we're certainly aware that they are the wired generation. Always had it in it, cell phones, Google, Wi-Fi. They are independent, excuse me, they are self-directed and confident. And I think, again, that is a trait worth leveraging within our industry. And they're very entrepreneurial. So again, something that we can leverage, just as the title of this slide shows, to be emerging leaders within our industry. So that's background of thinking of how we can use this upcoming emerging leader group to again further just benefit and have outcomes that benefit our industry. So what does that mean for us as PRCI? The next slide really is the conversations I have within our organization, and certainly we have with our executive board, and maybe more often I have run around in my head of how do we take our traditional approach of the research result reports, which is what you see on the left-hand part of this slide. And some of those are pretty lengthy. They can be a couple of hundred pages in length. And I don't mean that as a derogatory comment. My point is there's a lot to digest. And the reason for that, obviously, is research typically is pretty thorough in how we bring information together, and we want to present that and be complete. But at the same time, how you deliver that or how you move that to consumption can be a bit of a challenge. And so in the upper right portion here is more maybe of a classroom setting, how you can take a subject matter expert and allow them to pick out the pieces from a content delivery perspective and prioritize that and point out, say, the 5 things that they need to make sure that they're aware of. But that still leaves room, I wouldn't say for error, but for differences of approach, again, of how something ends up getting delivered. So then the question becomes, well, how can you better standardize a process from a workflow automation? How can you, again, leverage data? We really centered here on data and making sure that we understand how we can do that. How can you increase efficiencies for performing critical functions within the organization? And of course, enhancing knowledge retention within an organization. More and more of that answer is software. And so on that bottom right-hand component of this is just that. In moving for PRCI, more research results from a research report into something that can then be consumed more consistently, more readily, and more efficiently within an organization, and that being software. So how are we doing that specifically? The next slide is really just a quick graphical to represent that. On the left-hand side, you'll see the software tools that we currently have deployed. Technical Toolboxes are authorized software distributors, so you can certainly find those within their portfolio of tools for licensing. But that is historic, if you will, I say current, and then under development and now getting released is what's on the right-hand side. So we continue to want to expand our delivery into more software for the reasons I just mentioned. More standardization, better efficiency, more systematic, better knowledge retention in the actual system versus in an individual. And that's not to be disrespectful for individuals needing to work in an organization. We still need them. But the more content that we can deliver through software, we just feel like is better for certainly us getting our content into the industry. And then secondly, it's just better for the industry overall in actually launching content out to be consumed. So that's where we're at today, from taking research being developed and making it into content to be delivered, and a real emphasis this year on software deployment. So more to come, and you'll likely hear about those directly through Technical Toolboxes, and certainly through us as we launch those products into again more of those consumable software products. Last item I really want to offer as a quick overview for perspective in our conversation today is moving from data to impact. And I picked that up from this graphical representation on the right-hand side, that the data is not useful until you start creating the path of identifying the information in those data sets, starting to connect the dots with knowledge, insight, and wisdom to make impact. And so for us, that has become more and more important. And for our members, it's being more and more demanded that instead of recreating data every time that we want to do a project, let's leverage the data that's available from our member organizations. So anytime that we can have thousands of data points from one organization turn into millions of data points, again, we can leverage that for the best outcome of the membership for us, and we believe as the industry as a whole. So really not a lot to spend on here other than to bring awareness that this is another area of increased emphasis for us through our Virtual Technology Development Center, VTDC, in information sharing and again, making impact with the data that's already available within the multiple member companies that exist out there. So more to come in this space for sure. There may be some questions that get generated later in this webinar, Joseph, but certainly look forward to working with Technical Toolboxes and the industry to leverage data in the coming months and certainly coming years. So with that, I think I will wrap up my comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Drew at this point to make an introduction and give some information on this topic as well. Drew?
Thank you, Gary. So as Gary said, I'm Drew Lafleur. I'm the CEO of Technical Toolboxes. Been with Technical Toolboxes since 2017, and prior to that, I worked for about a decade at a major operator, and most of their North American assets in one form or another. If you go to the next slide, I believe we're going to do a quick quiz. So if you would take just a minute to tell us a little bit about how you currently do engineering analyses. I'll keep this open for just a few more seconds here. Okay, you want to go ahead and close that and let's see the results.
Give it another 5 seconds because the results are now skyrocketing here, if you don't mind, Drew. So
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we'll go ahead and close the results. Share. Back to you, Drew.
All right, so looks like most people are doing crossings calculations with a good bit of integrity management and corrosion. Not too different than what we kind of had in our heads, but thank you very much for taking the time to help us understand a little bit more about how you do your work. If we go back to the slide. So building on what Gary was talking about, we have this concept of the Great Recession, and every time a person leaves, they take with them a piece of knowledge, either about your asset, about how to do a calculation, or what to do with it after you've done a given calculation. You know, we have a high price environment, and we hear about operating companies and engineering service providers wanting to be able to scale up to take advantage of the current high price environment, but knowing that there's always another bust cycle around the corner. And so we want to do it in a way that is scalable and supportable and doesn't overexpose us to risks of a downturn in the market. And while the prices are high, the consequences of failures, spills, etc., are also very high, even higher than they have been in the past. Combination of culture, environmental regulations, and general public perceptions, it makes having a failure much more costly than it has been in the past. And so one way to overcome this is through digital transformation. We take many of the concepts that have been successful in other industries and in other aspects of oil and gas industry and apply them to midstream engineering processes. And so the pillars of digital transformation on intelligent oil field are people, process, and technology. Right? And so we really want people to follow processes and to leverage technology to become more powerful, more impactful than someone working in an analog world. Then we need the technology to enable the processes that help us be most efficient, most productive. So when you get all of this working properly and you have a good core of your data set, then you can leverage this to be very scalable, and you can avoid some of these pain points or mitigate them with people leaving the company, because you have kind of guardrails, electronic training and onboarding processes in the form of guided workflows, workflow automation, and good engineering software. And all of this comes together to help you reduce risk, reduce costs, accelerate your project schedules, and improve profitability. If you go to the next slide, please. So again, building on some of what Gary was saying, through this digital transformation process, through leveraging software to enhance an engineering organization. You get the benefits of process standardization, improved collaboration, greater team efficiency, improving the working data set that is central to all of these analyses, and improving the organization's ability to make data-driven decisions. Lastly, we can improve knowledge retention and transfer, as we talked about one aspect in the process of how to do calculations, how to do analyses, what to do with them, how to communicate them to the field, but also knowledge about the asset itself and the operating conditions and environment can be captured as a part of their daily working process and then leveraged across the organization. If you would go to the next slide. So we have the hub as an enterprise platform for your engineering organization. And it really connects our library of engineering standards and calculations and analyses to your organization and your data. So whether you have a central data repository that you want to leverage, or you're trying to build one version of the truth, we have options to support both. Our combination of software, our SME support network, onboarding resources, and our technical training programs enables new engineers to become productive and effective much faster. Again, this helps as not only with the Great Resignation and having to pick up where holes may be left in the organization, but also even before the Great Resignation, there's a trend in the oil and gas industry, as in many, that people rotate between job assignments on a fairly regular basis to continue to grow their career. So you may have a very senior engineer transitioning into a new role that they are not so experienced in, and they may need access to resources like this in order to get up to speed very quickly. The tools we have also facilitate retaining personnel knowledge by converting it into corporate memory and leveraging it across the organization. So whether it's different functional groups within a given business unit or asset area, for example, taking the work of your integrity team and making it immediately leverageable by your crossings or encroachment team, so that they can spend less time on discovery and requesting data, and more time on integrating that and making better decisions about encroachments and crossing approvals. Scale performance across the engineering organization, again, knowledge transfer, workflow automation, and collaboration enablement. And all of this helps you really create value across the entire pipeline lifecycle. Can we go to the next slide? So it can be very difficult to nail down the benefits or the ROI of digital transformation. And we've been able to get some very good customer success stories about the results that companies get by taking on our solutions and helping them with the automation of workflows and the standardization of their engineering processes. And so we have a few up here, whether it's an API inspector being able to accomplish twice as many inspections per year as before, or this Fortune 500 encroachments team getting a 200% ROI or an 85% efficiency gain on their team, or an engineering service provider that was doing HDD work and got a 6,000% ROI by taking on our solution, being able to perform at a much higher level and displacing competitors on a larger project scope. These kinds of success stories are pretty regular, but you have to get all of those pillars moving together at once, those being people, process, and technology. So if you would, the next slide. So we have the hub, and as we said, it covers the entire pipeline lifecycle: design, construction, operations, maintenance, and integrity. And we find that, and many studies have been done to show that engineers typically spend most of their time hunting for data, integrating it, QCing it, and building analysis or calculation tools and widgets, and integrating the results of those. And these teams frequently wind up having a silo effect that can lead to lack of alignment between groups, not really understanding who's done what and how they did it. So there's more reinventing of the wheel or redoing an assessment that somebody else already did, either because you don't know that they did it, you don't have access to the results, or you're not sure how they got from A to B. So you'd rather do it yourself than try and figure out how trustworthy that effort is. And each team often has its own set of data, its own version of the truth. And this can lead to different results of the same assessment coming out of different parts of an engineering team. And this can make you more inefficient and have you have an overall reactive posture. In order to have a lean team be highly effective and have a proactive posture, you need to be able to effectively leverage the work of others, a very good data set, and have workflow automation to keep engineers spending more time on the engineering pieces and less time on the clerical or gathering stages. If you would, advance the slide. Show the contents of these suites. All right, so as Gary talked about before, many of the applications that we have in here in the hub do come from PRCI, but we have other sources of IP, whether that be we develop it ourselves or we get IP from other sources to integrate into one holistic platform to be able to deliver engineering value across the pipeline lifecycle. And these are the names of the applications that you might find in the various suites that we offer. And again, some of the benefits that we get out of this for an engineering organization are the ability to scale up and scale down quickly in terms of work product and whatnot, without having to scale up so fast or down so fast with manpower, headcount during up cycles and down cycles. We get engineers working as engineers, not as graphical designers or data analysts. They spend more time extending runtime and decreasing failures, getting better engineering designs up front. You get better alignment between teams when your integrity team may be analyzing pitting depths and wall thickness variations in pipelines, and that is automatically made available to those analyzing encroachments or crossings. We have knowledge retention and onboarding, and a lessened need for reworking issues that were analyzed by predecessors but saved in various server locations or hard drives, or have assumptions behind them, not sure exactly where did all of this data come from. We structure unstructured data, leverage one version of the truth, and make sure that everyone in the organization has quality data readily available and has the same access to quality data. And all of this, as I said, leads to a reduction in duplication of effort, such that each discipline leverages analyses built by others or used by others, and that can enable the combined power of the organization to be brought to bear to solve tomorrow's challenge, instead of reworking those that were already solved in another part of the organization last month or last year. If you would go to the next slide. And so that concludes our talk on the data-driven future, how to achieve that. And I'm going to turn this over to Joseph, who will walk us through the Q&A.
All righty, Drew. Can't thank you enough. Mr. Gary Hines, can't thank you enough as well. Appreciate you both attending this webinar here today. So, ladies and gentlemen, what is next step? So I invite you all to stay for the next 15 to 20 minutes as we have a live action round Q&A. I've already seen some good questions starting to come through. Mr. Gary Hines, tune up here, so because we got some coming your way here in just a second. I see some good ones coming in. But with that being said, you know, after the Q&A discussion, what other questions do you have? You know, reach out to us for info about the Pipeline Hub platform. You all are going to be getting a complimentary email sent out to you immediately after this by one of our colleagues here, Stuart Como. Be on the lookout for that email. If you have immediate questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to him, myself, or Drew, if you have our contact information. If you would like to see this all for more detail, right? You know, Gary went through and showcased a lot of apps that we work with PRCI to, you know, license. We also have many other applications within the corrosion, integrity, inspection, encroachment suites, you name it. If you would like to see these areas in more detail, just let us know in the chat bar. Submit your question there, or i.e. saying, hey, I'd like to see this in more detail. We can certainly set something up for you. But before we go on to the Q&A, everyone, I'm going to launch one final poll. Again, we have one final poll to go through here today as we close this out. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this. So you should see this come across your computer right now. And the poll question is as follows. What about the Pipeline Hub and what Drew and Gary mentioned today interests you the most? Again, what about the Pipeline Hub interest you the most? You're going to see various answers you can choose from. Time savings, different standardization, meeting ever-changing regulations, integrated applications, something other than even what we described here. So I'm going to give everyone another 20 to 30 seconds here. Please start answering the poll question. Your results are very much appreciated. And maybe another 15 seconds here. A lot of good responses coming in. Thank you all for the participation. Another 8 seconds. 5 seconds. All righty, in 3, 2, 1, we're going to be closing the poll out. All right. Now let's share the results. Let's see what we're looking at. So looks like a majority is what interests you the most is the standardization, right? You know, you got different groups, get different people doing maybe the same task in a different way. Standardization is key. I totally understand and see that with everything kind of rounding out pretty evenly from time savings, meeting changing regulations, asset management, you name it. All righty, so I'm going to go ahead and hide this. Let's open up the Q&A here. So again, I invite you all to submit questions as they kind of come in. Highly encourage you all start submitting those questions, and we're going to start answering those as they come in. So with that being said, I see some questions coming in right now, just in opposed to the applications that you saw today, training, etc. So with Technical Toolboxes, we offer training in different ways. We have a dedicated training department led by our training director, Sean. Many of you have probably worked with her in the past, but we offer various topics that cover different parts of the pipeline space. You know, even if I went back a couple slides here, you know, we have many different industry level technical trainings that cover horizontal directional drilling, crossings, hydro testing, AC mitigation, you name it, led by subject matter experts within Technical Toolboxes or within industry. They range in length, they range in topics covered, but you receive professional development hours to those. We invite you to visit our website. We offer those on a monthly basis, and we have a lot of exciting topics there to cover. Now, that's in regards just to industry training. We also, for those of you that currently work on the hub or with Technical Toolboxes, PRCI software, we have different subject matter experts to where we can do software training as well on an as-needed basis. So for those of you that had questions on training, wanted to kind of cover that topic first. Mr. Gary Hines, if I could maybe queue you up, please. We got a couple questions that would probably more so serve for you, sir. So Gary, the first question I have for you, if you're ready, is you provided some upcoming potential software applications that we will likely see in the near future. What areas, this is the question, what areas of research are you seeing in the next few years for additional topics and or areas of focus for PRCI that the industry may see within software? And the time frame is, in the next year and a half to 2 years, Gary. Could you expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure will on that, Joseph, thanks. The first thing that comes to mind there is what we within PRCI call our strategic research priorities. Acronyms are everything these days, so we call them SRPs. Those are what I would call emphasized areas of interest from I'll just call it our shareholder group, our executive assembly, that they've dedicated funds to in a relatively short period of time to get the highest amount of value out of. So as an example, currently we've got 3 strategic research priorities, 3 SRPs, and one of those is on the optimization and detection and mitigation of mechanical damage. Certainly not all operators deal with this, but for those that do, we've got some things that are coming to fruition now from a research perspective that, even from a software perspective, it may not be software, but just what Joseph, you just talked about and what Drew highlighted from a workflow perspective. So that's something that I think is, maybe 8 to 12 months out, maybe not even the 18 to 36 or 18 to 24 months out. The other one I can think about right now is our pathway to achieving efficient and effective crack management. Crack management is certainly something that about every pipeline deals with in different ways because of different reasons. I think that one is more of that 18 to 24, 18 to 36 month out regarding some outcomes from assessment of cracks in pipelines and also, again, just effective management. So that's an area I would say from an integrity management perspective. Again, I'm thinking about some of these polls, Joseph, that you've queued up. And Drew, that you had that emphasized that. And the last one really goes back to that first poll on what I would just categorize as more of this ESG space. Certainly a lot of interest there for how we can mitigate and reduce methane emissions. And so we've actually got a strategic research priority on GHG emission reduction as well that already has some good, what I would call calculators that they've been working on for assessment of projects and how do you know whether you approach project A or project B. It's not really what I call an engineering calculator, but certainly taking full assessment of outcome of projects and evaluating on what we just call a CO2 equivalent basis. So I do think that there's some things in maybe not near term, but I would put it in that ballpark of 12, 18 months, 12, 24 months out in our strategic research priority initiative. So those are the first 3 I can think of where there's more to come. And I would just say that 2 of those, to kind of round that out from an answer, 2 of those are certainly more in the integrity management space. And the third one, I think I would categorize in that environmental, social, and governance arena, ESG, that first poll really highlighted earlier in the webinar.
Gotcha. Appreciate that, Gary. I'm going to piggyback off on that just a hair here with another question for you. And we got some that I think would go to Drew after this. But Gary, what is changing at PRCI based on what you mentioned in regards to Gen Z and the Great Resignation? Anything that is creating challenges or maybe opportunities for PRCI? Could you expand on that a little?
Yeah, I think it's both challenges and opportunities. Here's where I would say challenges. is, traditionally how we've engaged individuals in committees and in projects. I think it's changing a bit, and here's the positive that I see. The one thing that I've observed on millennials and Gen Z, certainly whenever there is a cause that they are passionate about, you almost have to hold them back. In other words, they are all in, and that is a real positive. And I love that about the initiative and the self-confidence and the direction, solving a problem. So what that develops for us, and again, that somewhat comes back to what I just mentioned about these different priorities, is because we're really looking to solve a major, at least a piece of a major challenge in a shorter period of time, let's say 3 years, maybe 4 years, but 3 years. So 3 years is still a long time, but compared to some research that might last 10 years, it's relatively quick. But I guess my point is that Gen Z, I feel like that they want to jump in for a cause and solve a challenge, solve an issue, and then potentially jump out and go to the next one. And so I just think we have to be more agile. I guess the key word I would say there is agile in how we engage those, at least within PRCI as a trade association that looks for representatives within our member organizations to represent their company, but for the good of an industry solution. We just have to keep an eye on how long we want to keep them engaged. I think if it's for too long, they may wane a bit as far as that level of engagement. But leverage that passion, I think, is something that we've improved upon, and something, again, that is an opportunity for us to do better with as we continue to move forward with some of these initiatives.
Okay, Gary, I appreciate that. Drew, I got some questions for you, sir, if you don't mind. And time pending, Gary, we might flip some back on you. So, Drew, in regards to the ESG kind of area, there's several questions. I'm just honestly going to lump into one for you, Drew, is in regards to regulatory compliance, DOT, PHMSA, EPA, US, Canadian. How does the Pipeline Hub help towards regulatory compliance? Is it a particular module, Drew? Is it a collection of them, a particular apps? How does it help an organization in regards to regulatory compliance? Could you expand on that, Drew, please?
Sure. So instead of having a particular module dedicated to a regulatory body like DOT or PHMSA, all of the engineering calculations that we have and the reports that are generated within the hub are designed to prove prudent operatorship, to prove compliance with the regulations of those bodies. So, whether it's API 1102 calculation for highway crossing, or R strain for remaining strength of externally corroded pipe, or any of the other couple hundred calculations, analyses that we have in there, they're all geared towards regulatory compliance that meet the best practice or the recommended practice or the standard provided by API, DOT, PHMSA, and organizations such as that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Drew, I think it does. And another question to kind of expand on that, maybe I'm pairing these two together for a reason, but in regards to the integration within the hub, it looks like we mentioned in a slide back, and some users are asking about the GIS capabilities, or it was in a poll question. Could you expand on that and kind of go into more detail, Drew, on how this, the question is, how does that make it an integrated platform? What type of GIS application is in there? If you could provide a little bit more detail on that, Drew, that would be good. There's some questions regarding to what is it, how does it work, etc.
Sure. So the map that we use inside of the hub is a Esri plugin. It's a full Esri implementation. And Esri is one of the biggest providers in this space, and many oil and gas companies are Esri members as in their normal work outside of the hub. And so sometimes it just helps to be able to see a pipe on a map whenever you're doing a calculation for extra context. Maybe what's it near? Is it, what kind of terrain? All that kind of stuff versus just a name and some pipe characteristics. But we can plot events on the map, so you can run a heat map of maybe where's your corrosion the worst, what are the inspections that are coming up in the next 6 months or the year, what is how many crossings have been doing in different areas, things of that nature. But another use is the integration capability. So whether it's selecting a pipe that you want to analyze from the map and having all the known properties of that pipe from the database be preloaded into your calculation, that's one of the features that we offer. Another one is data enrichment or geospatial calculations, geospatial analysis. So it could be that you need an elevation profile for a hydrotest plant. So we can leverage LiDAR to get the ground elevation, or maybe you need the overburden calculation for an HDD. Again, the LiDAR capabilities of the GIS integration can help there. Alternatively, you may need distances and angles, proximity metrics, maybe for AC mitigation to calculate the angle of approach and the proximity of power lines to pipelines. There are many features, many such features this way. And the integrated data environment is that once you put a pipe, you load a shape file or you draw one in the map or whatnot, you can then leverage that across all of the engineering calculations that we have. You can also leverage that across your organization by sharing it, making it available to your peers. And then any calculation that gets done on that particular piece of pipe knows it's what it's tied to, what it's about, and others can discover work that was done by other parts of the organization on a given pipe of interest or in a particular area of interest. There's more to it, but at a high level, that's how I would summarize it.
Yeah, Drew, and I appreciate that, and I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. I believe that probably answered the questions that came in, but that's, ladies and gentlemen, what really helps create these customer success stories that Drew mentioned earlier of, the full integration piece. The map is just one portion of it, but everything that Drew expanded upon is how these organizations, just as an example, leveraging our applications, leveraging the IP by PRCI, bringing all that together as one to create a huge return on investment, whether it's time savings, risk reduction, cost savings, you name it. That's how these stories really, that's where the genesis of it and they come to play. I got a couple questions I can quickly answer, then maybe one more to round out the presentation here. Just some questions on the API inspection suite. What do we have there? It's a full API inspection suite for the questions that came in there. It covers 653 for above ground storage tanks, 510 for process piping inspection, inside the fence, outside the fence, and then 510 for pressure vessels. It comes with complete asset manager. That is our API inspection suite, again, that you can see here, and comes with a real plethora of different applications. Also, there was some questions of what other webinars we had. We have our paid training webinars, as I mentioned earlier, that's led by Sean. Lastly, we do these right here, these industry webinars, roughly every 4 to 6 weeks. We'll be having another one come in June, mid-June, so be on the lookout for that. Excited to have you all join that one. But last but not least, might be a joint one for maybe Gary and Drew. Drew, if you want to start it off, I see some questions on, where's Technical Toolboxes and PRCI going? You mentioned that a little bit before, Gary, but it looks like the questions are more to what other applications? Where does Technical Toolboxes see the hub going in the near and maybe long-term future, Drew? If you could expand on that, just in areas of pipeline engineering, et cetera, and the industry.
Right. So as Gary put up there, in his slide deck. We want to continue to make the offering more holistic for engineering analysis and plug holes in the offering, as well as bring next generation analyses to the market. So some of the things coming in the corrosion aspect might be the P-squared application, which is kind of a next-gen version of RString that leverages big data sets and big data analytics to come up with less conservative but very pragmatic assessments of corroded areas of pipe. We have the API 1149 application that PRCI has put together with a joint study with some assistance from PHMSA to improve the algorithms there. We would be very excited to bring to market. Aside from that, we're going to continue to be filling other aspects of our offering. We have an investigative dig management program that's working, hopefully going to be released later this year. And then we're going to continue to improve on the knowledge capture, knowledge transfer capabilities. And one of the things that is in our roadmap, but we haven't dedicated a timeline to it, is a lessons learned repository that can help customers retain knowledge about lessons learned.
Follow up with you individually, whether it's myself, Drew, Gary, someone else within our organizations. Happy to answer those. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We'll be talking to all of you here soon, and be on the lookout, as I mentioned, for future webinars here in the near future. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your Tuesday and a great rest of your week. Bye.